I wasn't supposed to be back at the cabin for another 2 weeks, but something felt off. Maybe it was the way my neighbor dodged my calls, or how the security camera suddenly went dark. So I packed up early, drove through the night, and pulled into the gravel drive just as the morning fog was rolling in. That's when I saw her Karen from the HOA standing on my porch like she owned the place. Phone in hand, already dialing 911, she didn't expect me to show up. That much was clear. Her whole expression changed when she saw me step out of the truck. "You're trespassing," she snapped, voice high-pitched and shaky. I just stared at her, wondering what in the world gave her the idea she had any right to be there. But before I could say a word, a second car pulled up. And the moment Karen saw who stepped out, her face went completely pale, like she'd seen a ghost. Turns out, she kinda had. This story isn't just about an entitled HOA president trying to take over someone's cabin. It's about a secret that had been buried for years, something Karen never thought would come back to haunt her. But that morning, with me standing on one side and the past walking straight up the steps behind her, everything changed. What happened next wasn't just justice, it was personal. And it turned a simple HOA dispute into something way deeper than I ever expected. Karen stumbled back a step, eyes locked on the man walking up the path. I glanced between the two of them, confused. He was older, maybe late 50s, with a familiar walk and a face that looked like it had seen its share of battles. "I told you I'd see you again," he said, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the cold mountain air. Karen didn't say a word, her lips parted, but nothing came out. I'd never seen her this rattled. Usually, she was the loudest voice in the HOA meetings, the type who talked over people, handed out fines like candy, and made herself the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. But now, she looked like a scared kid cornered in her own playground. I finally spoke up. "What's going on here? You called the cops on me for being in my own cabin and now you're the one about to faint." I wasn't joking either. She looked like her knees might give out. The man stepped closer and pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "This land has a deeper history than your paperwork shows. Karen here knows exactly what she tried to cover up years ago. And now it's time it all comes to light." He handed me the document, and the moment I read the first line, my gut dropped. It wasn't just some property dispute anymore. This was personal, and Karen. She was at the center of something much bigger than an HOA drama. The paper in my hand was a sworn statement, sealed and notarized nearly 25 years ago. It detailed an illegal land acquisition tied directly to Karen's late husband and a now-defunct development company. The land my cabin sat on wasn't just recreational property. It had once belonged to a small family who vanished from public records after a fire burned down their original home on this same plot. According to the man standing beside me, his name was Lewis's accidental fire. Wasn't so accidental. Karen's silence made more sense now. She wasn't just worried about an HOA infraction or overstepping her boundaries. She was staring down a truth that could unwind everything she'd built her identity on. And Lewis? He wasn't just some neighbor. He was the only surviving member of that family. His brother, his sister-in-law, their kids, they were the ones who'd lived on this land before the so-called fire. And he'd been chasing the truth ever since. Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, whispers were spreading. People noticed Karen was acting different, jumpy, avoiding meetings, even skipping her usual 6 a.m. dog patrols. One of the newer residents, a retired journalist, started asking questions, digging into county archives. Another family came forward, saying they'd been pressured out by Karen's enforcement crew just a year ago. Every layer pulled back seemed to reveal more dirt: HOA abuse, hidden property transfers, and now possible criminal cover-ups. But Lewis said there was still something buried deeper. Something Karen would do anything to keep hidden. Louis and I stood outside the cabin just after sunset, the air thick with tension. He stared off toward the trees like he was listening for something or someone. He'd gotten word from a county records clerk who'd found a sealed folder tucked behind old zoning documents. It had Karen's husband's name on it, plus 2 signatures the clerk didn't recognize. Louis was sure that file held the last piece of the puzzle, maybe proof of how Karen ended up owning the entire ridge above the lake. But we couldn't request it not without triggering alerts in the system that would tip her off. Meanwhile, Karen had gone unusually quiet. Her porch lights hadn't come on in days, and the HOA golf cart hadn't been parked in front of her house since Tuesday. A couple of residents claimed they'd seen her meeting with a man in a black SUV at the end of the cul-de-sac near the woods. Someone said they were loading boxes. Another whispered that Karen had emptied her home office computer, binders, even photo frames. It was like she was trying to vanish before the truth caught up. But what she didn't know was that Louis had already made copies of the old land surveys and deed transfers, one signed under forged names. We were planning to take it to the sheriff's office in the morning. I hadn't told Karen who I really was yet, but that time was coming fast, especially now, with headlights pulling up the long dirt road. As the headlights rolled closer, Louis motioned for me to step behind the side wall of the cabin. We stayed quiet, watching from the shadows as the SUV came to a slow stop in front of Karen's old utility shed. One she swore had been condemned months ago. 2 figures stepped out. One was definitely Karen, moving fast and looking over her shoulder. But the second wasn't the same man from before. This one was wearing a dark windbreaker with a federal badge clipped to his chest. Louis tensed. "Not local law," he whispered. "That's out of jurisdiction. Or internal affairs, maybe." Before I could respond, the man unlocked the shed, and what we saw made our stomachs drop. Inside were crates marked equipment, some military surplus, and others with electronics that had no business being on HOA property. Karen was clearly hiding more than forged deeds. This wasn't about land anymore. Looked like she'd been using the HOA to launder supplies or property under the radar, possibly for someone else. And now the feds were here to clean it up, or cover it up then. Karen glanced around and paused. She must have sensed someone watching. She stepped out, eyes scanning the woods, and called out loud enough for us to hear. "You shouldn't have come back early." Louis looked at me, jaw clenched. "She knows." At that moment, my phone buzzed. No number. I picked it up. The voice on the other end simply said, "You've been seen. Get out now." I didn't wait. I dropped the call and nodded to Louis. We slipped around the back of the cabin, cutting through the brush toward the dirt road. My truck was hidden behind a thicket about 100 yards out. Every step felt like a race against something unseen. Just as we reached the clearing, blue and red lights lit up the sky like fireworks. A convoy of unmarked SUVs and sheriff units rolled in fast, tires kicking up gravel. Deputies piled out, weapons drawn, but not pointed. I stepped forward, hands raised, flashing my badge. "Chief Bennett, this property's under county jurisdiction." The lead officer, someone I'd worked with years ago, lowered his stance. "We got a tip. DEA's been compromised. You're lucky you answered when you did." In the chaos that followed, Karen tried to slip away in the confusion. But Louis spotted her, sprinting across the ridge trail. He cut her off near the creek bed. When they brought her back in cuffs, she didn't say a word, just stared at me like she finally realized who I was. It should have ended there. But then one of the federal agents handed me a folded note found in the back of the shed. It had my name on it. Inside were 3 words, scribbled in red ink. She wasn't alone. My stomach turned. This wasn't just Karen. This went deeper, higher, and whoever else was involved knew I was onto them now. I wasn't just cleaning up a crooked HOA anymore. I was stepping into something far bigger. I held the note in my hand for a long time, standing there in the quiet that followed the chaos. Karen was loaded into the back of the sheriff's cruiser, her expression frozen somewhere between fear and fury. Whatever network she was a part of, it was unraveling fast. She knew it. The U.S. Marshals swept through the property for hours, combing through files, devices, and hidden compartments I didn't even know existed. Turns out, that cabin wasn't just a vacation rental, had been a front for something far more organized and way more dangerous than anyone in the HOA could have imagined. Back at home, my wife sat on the porch with a blanket over her shoulders. She looked tired, but safe. We didn't say much, just held hands and watched the sun set behind the ridge. It was finally quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come easy after weeks of threats, confrontations, and secrets buried under HOA rules and fake smiles. The community slowly learned the truth, and while some neighbors still avoided eye contact, others came by to apologize, even offer help rebuilding. Turns out, not everyone was in on it. Just enough to make it ugly. Karen's arrest made headlines, and the investigation spread far beyond our little mountain town. But for us, it ended where it all started, down that porch, together, knowing we stood our ground.